Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is episode 41. I'm Jacob, and I'm here with Charlie and Decima. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about resolutions. Since the new year is coming up, and this will be airing right before the new year on New Year's Eve.
Awesome. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yes.
This week's interview is with Jazz, who successfully tapered off Kratom and powder Kratom at that. And I think one of the interesting takeaways was she finally got to the point where her Kratom addiction was getting in the way of her exercise addiction, meaning somebody that once ran a 125-mile race, but her Kratom use slowly eroded her athleticism over time.
Oh, it's cool that we got someone that's successful in taping. We haven't had too many of those stories on this podcast, so I'm excited to hear that one. I think, Decima, you had some resolutions that you wanted to start us off with, so I'll give you the mic.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm loving that I have been hearing a lot of people making the resolution to quit Kratom out there in the community, which is amazing. I'm rooting you guys on out there for that. I do have some resolutions. I have 3, and 2 of them are kind of like, they're kind of deep personality type. Get in there and adjust some things in my life. And then the other one's a pretty simple one. But I have some mottos for 2024. I feel like a lot of times in the past, I've been really focused on, like making money, being successful, all those things that people generally focus on. And this year, I'm just going to assume that I'm not going to waste some energy. I'm going to assume that that's just going to be there, and I'm going to focus on gratitude. So my 2 mottos for next year are going to be attitude of gratitude and also poor in 2024, because I don't care how much money I have, I am going to identify as a poor person. I'm going to live accordingly. Those are my 2 biggies. And then my small one, I actually wanted to throw this one out there and urge everybody to do this one. It's very simple. Alt text. If you guys post images on the internet, on social media, etc., if you use that alt text or a description on your photos for our people that are blind or visually impaired, it's super helpful. And I'm going to make a commitment to do that myself. So those are mine, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have.
Cool. I have 3 as well. So my first one is kind of personal related. I have not been doing a lot of strength training this year. I started off 2023 pretty strong, then, got sober, kept it up with cardio and whatnot, but let the strength training lapse. So I'm going to definitely start that, and a big believer in you don't have to wait till the new year. So I've actually already started doing more strength training this month, and I'm going to keep that up and hopefully put on some muscle mass in 2024. I have 2 that are Kratom related, or well, tangentially at least. So the second one is I am going to spend a lot less time on social media. I've also already started this. I haven't really been going on Reddit at all. I have spent very little time except for the moderation that I've been doing on Facebook, and I only really go on Instagram for posting pictures of my dog. So gonna also do that. And the third and final one is I took a position, and this is still basically my position on Kratom and regulation in general, that Kratom should be regulated sort of similar to recreational marijuana or alcohol, but I'm not going to wade into that debate anymore in 2024. I don't really have a lot to offer on that subject. It's not a passion project of mine, and I really don't want it to occupy any kind of space in my brain. So my new position for 2024, my resolution is to basically stay out of the Kratom regulation debate, and I don't really care one way or another if it remains legal or if it becomes illegal. I just don't really care. So that's my third resolution.
Excellent.
I just have to ask, though, do you care if it's regulated, or are you staying opinion free on that too?
Opinion free. Do not care one way or the other
Love
what
it.
happens with Kratom in regards to access regulation. Don't care at all.
And
Respect.
Jacob, I've never known you to be a 12-stepper, and that is the 12-step way, is to be
It is.
neutral on all outside matters. So are
It
you
is.
coming into the fold?
I don't know if I'm coming into the fold. I'm taking what I like. Yeah. I'm taking what I like from programs and applying it where I think it'll work best for me.
I think there's a reason behind that, that principle. It's a tradition. Yes, I have some resolutions too. Partly a couple episodes ago, I talked about doing this. We were calling it a Zen 75. It was a modification of Jan's Hard 75. And something I'm doing with Jazz this week from the interview and another person who is quitting Kratom. But I found that my Zen plan was a little bit like when I did the Zen Kratom plan, where just kind of got out of control and slowly my standards eroded. And so we're kind of doing a new jump start in the new year where I am going to start over if I don't do these habits that I want to form. So basically, no phone in my bedroom, number one. Number two, eat healthy. Number three, walk for 45 minutes a day at least, and hopefully get back to going to the gym. Number four is drink a half a gallon of water. I found that both my bladder and prostate, which I might edit this out at my age, can't handle a gallon. And number five is read 10 minutes a day. And so hopefully those will create new habits that will last the whole year. The Zen plan where we were just going to observe and kind of not beat ourselves up and be judgmental if I didn't accomplish any of those. It just didn't work. There's a reason to start all over the original plan. There's a reason that has that mechanism in it.
I love the casual.
Nice.
I'll just edit this out.
Yeah, I'll have to decide if I like the bladder and prostate joke.
I'm sure it's relatable.
Yeah. Quick note about our holiday special. Thank you again for everybody that called in. It was probably my favorite episode of all the ones that we've ever had out of all 40 of them previously, but it was also the one that had some of the worst sound quality. And that was because when you have Google Voice plus carrier coverage across America plus mobile phone use from the caller, it just doesn't equal good podcast sound. A quick correction, I said something about like we get 400 listeners per day. It's 400 downloads of each episode during the first week. I did the average. We have about 180 listens a day. In either way, this is going to be a poor podcast, just like we're talking about, Desmond. We'll be able to live in poverty.
Identify as a poor podcast.
Yes.
There we go. It's obviously cool to as people that work on the podcast to see the growth of the listening. Also kind of sad to know that Kratom addiction is probably growing quite a bit in North America just based on popularity and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely bittersweet, but I'm so glad, even if we're only reaching 10 people, I'm so glad that we're able to reach who we're reaching. So thanks for tuning in, you guys, for sure.
Yeah. And now for the interview this week. Hello, everybody. This week's interview is with Jazz.
Hey, Charlie. I'm doing okay today. How are you?
It's that little weird period of time between the New Year and Christmas.
It's a rough time, actually. I mean, it can be a good time for a lot of people, but also a lot of trauma triggers and things like that. Happy holidays, though.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah. Okay. So I am Jazz. I'm an elder millennial, so kind of an 80s child. I guess I'm a self-described nerd. I really love learning. I would stay in school forever if I could, but unfortunately that doesn't pay the bills. But I do work in academia and research, so even though I'm not a student anymore, I've sort of clung to that. And yeah, even though I am a voracious reader and I really love to learn, I am a very high energy person. I am very hyperactive. I always have been since I was a kid. So I have a lot of like frenetic energy, hence the nickname Jazz. I do a lot of running. I do skydiving, hang gliding, CrossFit, like anything that's active and moving. And yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, me in essence.
Not bad for a geriatric. How do you say that? Geriatric.
Geriatric.
Geriatric?
Yeah.
Geriatric?
Like Tom and Jerry. You should
Yeah.
keep this in the podcast. This is funny.
Yeah. not
Charlie Fumbles. Sure. Tom
not
and
bad
Jerry.
for not bad for a geriatric millennial.
Exactly.
And how long have you been off Kratom?
So today is December 27th, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. So Wednesday, the November 22nd. So it's been a month and about 5 days, so almost 5 weeks.
And I know you did a long, slow taper. How did that work?
Yeah, well, it started with quite a few fumbles, I would say. I decided that I wanted to and it needed to quit probably around the beginning of 2023. So I think it was around February that I actually found the WhatsApp group and the meetings, and I realized like, I didn't hit like one single rock bottom, but it was just destroying my life in so many ways. And yeah, I wasn't an athlete anymore. So anyway, I like spent all this time reading the Reddit forums and seeing what approaches work for people. I saw the taper guide. I was like, that's too much math. I don't want to deal with that, and spreadsheets and things like that. So I thought maybe I could do cold turkey, but then yeah, there was so much fear mongering on the not necessarily fear mongering, but so many anecdotal experiences that really deterred me from even like stepping into the pool of cold turkeying. Because I mean, even interdose withdrawals at my worst were like I would be jumping out of my skin. I was super super anxious all the time, so that wasn't going to work. But I did try the rapid taper thing quite a few times, and I just kept failing and failing, and I would give up, and then I'd stop like weighing the doses. And yeah, so eventually I said enough is enough, this isn't working. And I saw a post on Reddit where somebody was talking about slow tapers, and he said if anybody needs help with tapering, let me know. Like I tapered myself and now it helps me to give back. So yeah, so I actually reached out to him, and he kind of explained the taper process, and how you really really have to make small cuts. You can't just jump. Like I was trying to jump from like once I got to like 12 grams per day. I tried to jump like to 6, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm still tapering. Like I shouldn't be feeling so uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, it was like incremental. So obviously I had to have a lot of discipline, and that came in time. But yeah, just knowing that it was going to take a really, really long time to get to the end goal and be okay with that. Because I mean, I spent like half a year just failing. So once I really got on track, it was smoother.
I know I jumped ahead of that question because you're kind of famous around here. We don't have many taperers, and we've been having
Yeah,
demand audience for like you need to have more people who have tapered.
yeah. It's weird. I haven't come across too many people who have successfully done that, except for like this small group of tapers on Reddit. But yeah, apparently it's like, you know, I know you've teased this quote, but I always say like everyone's an experiment of one. So I mean, I have immense respect for anybody who can just cold turkey get off that stuff, because for me it's like, no, that's torture that I can't do. Death by a thousand paper cuts is like way more my style.
Well, we can rewind and maybe start the beginning of your kratom use. How did you get into it?
It's kind of like it was kind of a perfect storm for my kratom addiction to blossom and then spiral, because back in 2021, it was around May 2021, and I had like a lot of like traumas and re-triggering of traumas that were all like like coming together at the same time. I had just lost actually a few people who were very close to me, and I was assaulted, and it brought back triggers to a previous assault, and so I was in a vulnerable state already. And in the meantime, I was trying to, work out and run and deal with my trauma that way. I was trying to outrun my trauma. So I was like just spending all of my, instead of getting like therapy at the time and really like reaching out, doing that kind of work, I just kept running. And a friend of mine, she mentioned that there was this there was this herb that called kratom, where she's an ultra runner, and she said it helped her run faster and farther, and she felt very euphoric, and it took away all her cares. And so I'm usually, as a like a research scientist, I'm usually very very good about doing my due diligence and researching and critical thinking. But I was in this vulnerable state, and I didn't have the motivation, and I didn't care about myself at the time. I was going through all these like traumas, and so I just didn't care. So when I saw, like, when she told me that, and I read a few anecdotal reports like, oh, this is great for working out and great for depression. I was like, oh, okay, well, multi-purpose, but let's test it out. So I ordered some powder from an online vendor, and at first I didn't like it because I guess like on Reddit, they call it the wobbles. So I definitely had the wobbles at first. I didn't have a scale at all, so I just like took a little teaspoon and took a little bit, and I definitely got dizzy. I went for a run, and I was like running into the curb, and I thought, this isn't for me. But I kept like experimenting with it for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't really I was in this little trauma funk, and I was isolating. I just kept taking it, and I guess I started to build up a tolerance already. So that same dose, whatever it was, wasn't giving me the wobbles, but it made me feel euphoric and like just on top of this world, and all of my depression and trauma and all those like terrible, painful emotions just melted away. And I was like, this is amazing. So of course, like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And I should have gone and done a bunch of research and like on the side effects and gotten a fuller picture of it. But instead, like in my vulnerable, susceptible state, I did the whole confirmation bias thing where I went back on Reddit and only looked in the pro kratom forum and looked at like, oh, this cured my depression, or this is really, really. So I just kind of, it was a defense mechanism. Like, I blocked out all the negative information that was out there about it. And of course, it spiraled from there. Like, I started using it because as like a workout supplement, but then it had that other benefit at the time of supposedly curing my depression, masking it. And yeah, I got kind of hooked on that. So that's where it spiraled out of control.
You had wobbles while you were running?
Yes,
How
I
does what
did.
does that look like?
Oh my gosh. Well, good thing like I was during the pandemic, so there weren't too many people about. Otherwise, they might have thought that I was like, yeah, on something. I don't know, like when people were tweaking out on. I don't know what it looked like, but I was getting dizzy, and I'm like running into the curb, and I thought, oh man, I have to get home. There was one incident where uh, because it made me really nauseous at first, and I had to run behind this building and throw up into a trash can, like on the run, bodily
Yeah,
fluids.
and probably later that day or the next day you took some more kratom, right?
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, I did. It's like as soon as I got back from that run, I was like, well, I threw it up. I may as well take some more
Yeah.
to
That that that
replace it.
that that speeds up, that moves ahead my dosing schedule.
Exactly. Yep. Yes, I.
Well, you started hinting towards things started having some more negative effects from it.
Yeah, then so at first, like, even those sort of a blur, like I feel like I lost a lot of time over the past, yeah, 2.5 years that I was almost 2.5 years that I was using it. It's like, yeah, it was just a blur because I wasn't bringing awareness to any of my experiences. I was just going through the motions and dosing and trying to block out the negative feelings or feel something when I couldn't. But yeah, got to the point where, my tolerance increased, and I just to avoid inner dose withdrawals, I had to be taking in heaps of powder. Like, it got to the point, I think, was it this not this past summer, because that's when I was really serious about quitting, but I guess it was the summer before. well, sometime throughout 2022, I was taking heaps of powder, and I'd go for a run, and like 30 minutes into the run, I'd already be going through interdose withdrawals. And so my endurance would and my heart rate would spike, and I had to stop running. And I'm like, oh man, now I have to go back and take more powder. And it just took over my life. Like everything had to be, everything revolved around like, can I carry, can I bring Kratom here? Like going on trips, like, oh, I have to research. Can I bring it in my carry-on? Or going into a museum where they check your baggage. I'm like, oh man, can I bring it there? Like people asking, do you want to hang out here or do this? And I'm like, oh, do I have enough portable, like, do I have enough oblate discs that I can go out with this? Otherwise, like I probably have to stay at home so I can take it, or prepare water bottles and stuff like that. So there was that inconvenience, but then of course, like the physical, the loss of endurance was the main thing. Like it really wrecked my athletic ability, but also like hair loss. The cold intolerance was terrible. I was freezing all the time, even if it was like 60 degrees outside. I'm always bundled up like Nanook in the North. And I'm really glad that effect is gone. But yeah, it like took over, it's like your other guests have talked about it. There's never like, it doesn't cause respiratory depression. Like it's usually not by itself. It's usually not going to be lethal, but
Yeah.
so it's a more insidious kind of addiction.
And do you have a history of issues with other substances, having an addiction with them?
I don't actually. So kratom was the first substance that really sank its teeth into me. I will say, like, I probably do have addictive personality. I've joked about it before, and I think I do even more so now, but it's always been like habits, behaviors that have been addictive. So definitely like the hyperactivity, the need to exercise all the time. Like I have trouble sitting still. And when I was a kid with the trauma, I definitely engaged in some self-harm behaviors. So it was never substances. It's super weird. Like anything else, I could take it, or well, I mean, I haven't tried anything illicit, alcohol. I can,
You can take it or leave it.
oh yeah, I can take it or leave it. With other things, when I was in my college years, of course, I did the whole college thing of, you go out and you drink and sometimes you wake up hungover the next morning. But yeah, like as an adult, I drink so rarely, and it's like, yeah, it's not even worth even a little bit of a anxiety for me.
So how much kratom on average were you using, and what type? It sounds like it was powder.
Yeah, so luckily I never went down the extracts route. Like by the time it had sunk its teeth into me, I was doing more research and looking into how to quit and what to avoid. And I saw like, I found the Quitting Kratom subreddit, and I read about just how terrible the extracts are, like how crazily addicted they are. And so I avoided them. I want to even see one. And so my highest, I never used a scale until I decided at the beginning of this year, 2023, that it was time to quit. So, but I think it was probably about an average of like 30 to 40 plus grams per day, and even higher than that at times. Like if I was going through a really, really rough time with my depression, or, had some other trauma or some other emotional pain, then I would say screw it and I would just take in more. So I'm sure there were weeks where I was averaging like 70 or more grams per day, not for very long, but probably an average of like 30 to 40. And I would always buy it online from vendors. And yeah, just the green and red powder. I tried the white once and it gave me so much anxiety. I never wanted to touch that again. But me being having so much energy and being so hyperactive, like I liked the strain, quote unquote strains that are more sedating, I guess, or give you like a smooth sort of energy, not like fidgety. And
We don't need to see jazz on a stimulant.
no, we definitely do not. So here's a funny story. I once had a psychiatrist actually do think that I have a little bit of ADHD, but I
Yeah.
once had a psychiatrist say, oh man, I think you might have ADHD. You're very hyperactive. Why don't you try this? I think it was Adderall, and it was like for 2 days, and yeah, he was like, "No, you can't ever be on stimulants." I mean, I was bouncing off the walls. I was like, "Yeah, this is." I don't know. It's weird because if they're supposed to even you out if you have it, but
Yeah, and
yeah.
they some people that are hyperactive, they do, and they're
Mhm.
you know they're an important medicine. So beginning this year, what was the final straw? What just came together? You finally decided you wanted to quit.
Yeah, I don't think there was one final straw exactly. It was more just a convergence of all of these terrible symptoms. And plus, I really wanted to get back to being athletic and I would say maybe like the physical symptoms and the withdrawal symptoms are pretty torturous, but I guess they weren't in it themselves like enough to be the impetus for me to quit. But it was really when like my endurance fell apart and I couldn't do the things that I loved, which are all like very active hobbies. And I couldn't keep up with my friends anymore. I couldn't go for hikes. I couldn't go for runs with them. I had to like, you know, would have to bring a pack with all kinds of kratom, and even then I'd start going through inner dose withdrawals, and it just robbed me of my life. And I, I guess it like the spark started and I was on the Quitting Kratom subreddit and I would read and it yeah, I would become more and more motivated, but I didn't think I had it in me to really do it until I said enough is enough. And I forget how I found the WhatsApp group, but I think somebody from Reddit sent me a link to it, and I went to a meeting and I said, "Whoa, there's all these people who are like they actually have meetings about kratom, this crazy little substance that nobody's ever heard of." I guess a lot more people have heard of it than I thought, but yeah, I thought I was alone for such a long time. So it's really nice to have this community.
It's interesting. Some consider you like sort of an ultra athlete or exerciser. Kratom use is kind of common among that group.
I do know that in like the ultra endurance community, a lot of a lot of people who are very serious about that have a history of some trauma or addiction, and it's sort of like yeah this drive to just keep pushing and explore your limits. But also some people say when I know a lot of like former people who identified as self-identified as addicts in their previous lives, they go into ultra ultra running, for example, and the criticism is, oh, aren't you trading one addiction for another? And maybe, I mean, it can be deleterious and in a lot of ways, like David Goggins, for example, he's had so many health problems. I mean, I know his whole shtick is like, oh, go hard, look how yeah, like don't be a sissy, callous the mind, all of that stuff. But he has, I think he went into renal failure one time, like trying to do an 100-mile race on no training, and he's gotten lost. I mean, where he didn't prepare for this big race. I don't know the exact details, but it is, I think that kind of the ultra endurance world does attract those personalities, and I definitely think I have that kind of personality
Yeah.
myself, even though
Well,
it hasn't substances.
you've talked about trauma and other experiences. Have you had a chance to delve into those issues and heal from them?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I realized like that I needed to go to the root of those issues. I don't think you can just be successful and be sober from a substance or a behavior addiction by just removing the substance or whatever that addiction is. I think you have to like work on the issues that cause the addiction. And so for me, it was trauma. So yeah, I've actually been exploring like psychedelic therapy, and that's like a whole other podcast in itself. But it's a lot of ketamine clinics have been popping up, and licensed ketamine clinics, and the research on ketamine is pretty promising as long as it's accompanied by the right therapy and integration. And so yeah, I started to explore that whole psychedelic world, and I this time I did my research and actually went on, looked at peer reviewed articles and went to the primary sources. And so yeah, I've been working with some therapists, and I did a few psychedelic journeys and revealed a lot of insights, but definitely helped me process some trauma. But I also went in with the intention of getting off of kratom and having the discipline to taper without these constant setbacks. And for some reason, like the last psychedelic journey that I had, I came out of it and I had no desire to keep taking it. And so like the physical, it didn't heal me from physical withdrawal. I couldn't just stop cold turkey there. I think at the time I was taking like 4.5 grams per day. So I couldn't just jump off of that, but it just, yeah, it made me like just so turned off by it. And I just had no interest in it whatsoever. I was like, I'm taking the bare minimum amount to avoid uncomfortable withdrawals, and that's it. And after that, I just never, yeah, I didn't slip at all anymore. And I just kept decreasing incrementally until, yeah, I guess the day before Thanksgiving. And tapered so slowly at the end, like from 4.5 to 0, that I don't think I've really had much of the way in the way of pulse, but I also think the psychedelic journey, what psilocybin, the psychoactive compound in mushrooms, does is it also does a lot of like repairing of your receptors. And so I was hoping to avoid some of that psychological, emotional pause. And I think it did definitely help.
That's exciting. Just
Yeah.
to back up a little bit, what did your tapering failures look like?
So my major mistakes were trying to taper too quickly.
Okay.
Like as I said, so at first, I think the big thing was the first step when I read the taper guide was, you always, it's like I read it and I said, oh, okay, well, I don't have to go that slowly. Other people do, but I'm an athlete and I'm like not like comparing myself and saying, justifying why it's not going to be so hard for me, when in fact it was actually maybe more difficult in many ways. So I looked at the taper guide and I said, okay, well, I can. And then I saw that gabapentin can help. And I actually did have a script for that I wasn't using, that was prescribed for anxiety. And I said, oh, well, here's a use for that. Maybe I can use it to help me taper off. But then I'd have rebound anxiety from that and it didn't work. But yeah, the major mistake was thinking I could go from like, you know, like cutting it in half from 30 to 15 or 30 to 20 maybe at first was not that difficult. But then going from like 16 to 12, yeah, without going incrementally in between, that was terrible. Like I'd start to get these terrible withdrawals and I'd feel awful. So then of course I had to take a ton to like, yeah, get back to baseline, and it was just all over the place. It was a roller coaster. But once I talked to that person on Reddit and learned like you really have to go slowly, it was easier from there. I started to reduce from 0.33, 33333, like non-terminating grams per week was what I was cutting by. So it was very, very slow.
When you most recent highest, how many times a day were you dosing?
Oh gosh, a lot. I wasn't counting at all. Once I started on a taper plan, it was 4 times a day, and then I decreased to 3, and then I removed one. So then I was only doing one in the morning and one at, actually it was late afternoon. So, and then I would increase the time in between doses. But yeah, at my highest and even my average use, I didn't count it out. Like yeah, I just went to the the big bag and started to
Okay.
dose out the powder. Yeah.
And never, because you were buying it in bulk, it was never like a financial issue.
Yeah, it wasn't too much. I mean, I would say the most I've spent on it was maybe 150 a month. So not terrible. And that was like at my highest use because I never went to the extracts and I would get the deals. And yeah, so that wasn't really a big issue. Although it is nice not having to having a little bit extra, although bills went up, so that's where the Kratom savings are going now.
Definitely, I feel you there. Well, with your successful taper and everything, did you have any withdrawal symptoms?
In the beginning I did. I would say they were definitely minor compared to the comparison to the withdrawal symptoms I would experience if I tried to do a rapid taper, or like if I tried to cut too much, or if I tried to go 24 hours without kratom. So I would say like minorly, biggest thing, yeah, the cold intolerance was pretty miserable, and just not being able to regulate my body temperature and having my heart rate go funky, and anxiety. Yeah, the jumping, when feeling of wanting to jump out of my skin. Like I don't know if that's what restless leg is. I never had I never had the like literally restless leg where my legs were moving and fidgeting, although I'm just fidgety anyway, so maybe I just didn't notice it. But yeah, difficulty sleeping, of course, because my heaviest use, I would use a lot of red kratom to get to sleep. So that
Yeah,
was tough.
I think that general anxiety is maybe restless soul, and
Yeah.
that's definitely a withdrawal common experience. And the legs, I think, are literally when you legs are involuntarily moving, especially when you're trying to sleep. And the only time I ever had that was actually when I took an over the counter like overnight PM med for sleeping. It's recommended don't take those because that is a known thing that it can happen is cause the RLS. So
Yeah, I read that Benadryl and other antihistamines and things like NyQuil can exacerbate RLS. I did try NyQuil a few times and helped a little bit. I didn't notice any RLS, but it wasn't something I wanted to get hooked on. So that was like
yeah.
when after I, really couldn't sleep and needed to get like an hour or something.
And other than I know you combated your withdrawals with exercise, was there anything else that you found helpful?
Yeah, breathing exercises for sure. I learned about Wim Hof, so I downloaded the app, and I will say that I guess what it does is it puts you kind of trick your body into thinking that you start hyperventilating, trick your body into thinking that you're not getting enough oxygen, and then you go into like survival mode. So it gives you like natural endorphins. I suppose that's how it works. But yeah, some benefit from that. And then also, honestly, like I know you talked about a few podcasts ago, the gray area, like California sober. So I don't smoke, obviously. As an athlete, I like to protect my lungs, but I do consume edibles on occasion. And I did find those, they didn't, they didn't completely stop the withdrawals, but they kind of distracted from them and helped me get into a place where I could focus a little and do the breathing and meditation. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And I know it's only 30 days, but how is your life today? What are the improvements that you're experiencing?
Oh, a lot actually. So my health is 100% better. Wear like a running watch so it tracks my heart rate over time. And I mentioned that during my heavy use, and especially when I was going through severe interdose withdrawals, like my heart rate variability was terrible. My heart rate was spiking. My resting heart rate was elevated. And yeah, once I got actually like, so it's been a month and a week since I've been completely off, but I was at such a low dose for a while there that some of those health issues resolved, like even when I was probably under like 2 or 3 grams per day. My heart rate went down, resting heart rate went down to like the 40s or 30s. And yeah, I had to get a routine blood test and everything looked good. Although yeah, like my iron was low when I was on kratom, but besides that, I think it never like it didn't affect my kidneys or my liver or anything like that. But definitely the heart rate stuff and yeah, hormones. My menstrual cycle was all over the place, and it's calmed down. My hormones seem to be under control. I don't have the cold sensitivity so much anymore, so I can go outside in the freezing cold and not like feel like I'm dying. I still don't like the cold, but yeah, it's not as
How
terrible.
about emotionally? Are you feeling better?
Yeah, I think the psychedelic journeys helped with that quite a bit. Still do go through. I'm doing a lot of therapy as well with psychedelic informed therapists. So yeah, we're working a lot on my trauma and bringing out feelings and accepting them and things like that. But so I do think I made a lot of strides there, but also just not being on kratom anymore. I'm feeling music a lot more. I know a lot of people talk about losing interest in music or not reacting to it, and definitely feeling more connected to it, just more connected to people in the world in general. I used to isolate a lot and plan my schedule around my dosing, and now I don't have to worry about that. Like I can go anywhere and just empty-handed. It's kind of
Yeah,
cool. It's nice. It's
it
very freeing.
might be a little too early. So you experienced hair loss?
Yeah. I definitely did. And
So
it completely, yeah, I experienced hair loss and it completely stopped growing for a really long time. It has slowly started to come back and it seems to be growing more. And my skin isn't as dry, so those issues as well.
and is there any other supports that you have in place to kind of wrap yourself around to keep you on this track?
Yeah, I'm continuing to do the therapy, and I just have to stay vigilant, knowing now that my I always knew I had an addictive personality to behaviors, as I mentioned, but knowing that there are certain substances that can lure me in, like kratom, I I have to be very careful. I have to keep doing the work. I have to bring awareness to my emotions and feel them and not try to escape them. And also, yeah, just like taking what I learned and not making that mistake again of not doing my due diligence and my research to look at all sides of the coin.
Do you feel like you'll have it? This is the classic addict kind of thinking, like lingering thoughts, like I can moderate, or if I just use a small amounts, or I could do it just one time. That do
Yeah,
any?
so I will say that in the last had a couple of like random freak things happen in the last few weeks that have been sort of stressful. And I will say that like for a millisecond in my mind, it's like, oh yeah, just a little bit would help, maybe just 0.5 grams. But then, yeah, it doesn't last longer than that. And I know it's not even worth trying to moderate because I just don't want to go down that road. And I also got rid of my entire stash. Because I've never bought it at a store. I've never even seen it at a store because I don't go into gas stations that often. I pump outside and use the credit card. So it's not like I would be tempted to just go buy it. I'd have to actually go online and place the order and wait several days. So
Yeah.
yeah, luckily I'm protected that way.
Well, we can switch gears here a little bit and talk about some big picture things and careers and policy and stuff like that. I know you once worked in a big pharma job. Broadly, what are some of your criticisms of the industry? And
Oh yeah, so this is in relation to the whole like regulatory debate and kratom is the pro kratom people wanting FDA to approve it as a drug or as a food and just have it be regulated because it has shown some benefit in harm reduction. But yeah, in order for the FDA to actually regulate it, it would have to go through all these clinical trials to establish safety and efficacy. And the supplement industry compared to the pharmaceutical industry is like so unregulated and it's like yeah it's very you don't know what you're getting. The FDA doesn't actually officially regulate it. Like it's like they'll get warnings or fines if they make a claim that they're not allowed to make, but other than that they're kind of given the benefit of doubt, whereas drugs have to go through, like pharmaceuticals have to go through a huge approval process. But what I was talking about is that, the pharmaceutical industry isn't completely blameless either, because I know from experience working there, a lot of like what the pharmaceutical industries do, which was disillusioning to me as a consultant when I worked in that industry, is they'll sometimes fudge the data or not like overtly produce fraudulent data, but they might can in they have a hypothesis based on preliminary data and they really really want that their drug to seem efficacious or safe. And so if the results, like once you're replicating the study, don't show that conclusion that you want to show, you can either add more participants to add study power until you get a significant result, or maybe try some other analyses that would show a significant result that aren't the initial ones, and just like playing with the data in so many different ways until you get a meaningful result that would encourage the FDA to approve the drug. So it's just like a very nuanced issue, and there are major problems with the supplement industry, but also issues with pharmaceutical industry. And then there, because the pharmaceutical industry, those companies, they have a vested interest in getting their drugs approved because they're sponsoring the studies financially. So there's the whole profit driven argument, and it's just complicated.
I mean, my understanding, the supplement industry, there's a 1994 law called the Deshay Act, and companies who sell supplements or herbal products or any of these dietary supplements, they don't have to prove that their product is safe. The FDA has to prove that it's unsafe and it can remain on the market. And like you said, there's seems like the FDA has limited powers to crack down on these, warning letters,
Yeah.
things like that. And it sounds like the companies build that just right into their business plan to
Hmm.
pay these minor fines that might come with the letters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my hope would be that that with enough study sponsors, like pharmaceutical companies that are interested in maybe synthesizing the active nitrogenine compound in kratom to make it therapeutic or help as a harm reduction tool, eventually, maybe in 10 years after it's gone through like phase 3 trials, it'll be regulated and people can get it in a pill form or something like that. But yeah, I don't think it should be banned completely. Like I think we're on the same page about that.
Yeah. No, some kratom advocates would really not be happy if there was a prescription, or even if it was like an over counter the product that you had to ask the pharmacist for because it was behind the counter. But just selling the raw powder without the quality controls and regulation isn't safe either. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what the solution is long term. Well, you mentioned music earlier. What are some of your favorites?
Oh man, so I don't have one favorite for everything. It kind of depends on the circumstance, like the occasion. I know a lot of guests have said this before that they like everything but country, and I'm kind of the same way. But yeah, I play instruments, I sing, so I like, oldies, I like alternative rock, I like a little electronic dance music when I'm working out, or sometimes if I'm just need to like have a catharsis and cry my eyes out, I'll turn on some really, really sad, like a silent. I don't know if you know the band A Silent Film. They're sort of obscure indie, but yeah, yeah. Their songs are like in minor keys and just really, really eerie, and it's good for a cry. I don't know, but yeah. So I have to be very trite, I have eclectic musical tastes.
And what kind of instruments do you play?
So I play piano, keyboards, I sing, I play ukulele, I play a little bit of guitar. I would love to learn upright bass, but I don't know where I would keep it, or I mean, probably lift it, do enough CrossFit and weightlifting for that, but I don't know. I have a very small apartment, so I think it would be taller than the ceiling, to be honest.
Could we ever find you in a karaoke bar?
Yes, probably. Yeah. But only if they have the really obscure songs. I don't like I mean, I do love Journey, but if I hear Don't Stop Believin' in a karaoke bar one more time,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have any tips for people wanting to quit kratom?
Yeah, I would say don't rush it. Like that was, I mean, as we mentioned, like everybody's an N of one, so what works for me isn't going to work for you, and yeah, everybody has to tweak a protocol to work for themselves. But for me, it was when I tried to rush things that I kept backsliding, and it just drew out my whole like quitting journey even longer. So had I just like not rushed from the beginning, then and been patient with myself, then maybe I would have more time off kratom by now. But it was all a learning process. But as you said, like not a lot of people can't taper. They don't have the discipline, or maybe they can develop the discipline, but maybe that's just not something that works for them. So just yeah, I mean, if you do want to try to taper, then be patient and take the lowest, or cut as much as you can to not, while still remaining comfortable from with or having just like very minor withdrawal symptoms, and just tweak it and learn from, and also like keeping a log can help. So it's like this time on this date I took this dose, and here are my symptoms and my withdrawal symptoms, and then you can kind of go back and you have data, so you'll know like, I had the intention of doing that and then I didn't because it was too much work. But eventually I figured it out. It's like practice. Yeah. Say as I do, as I say, not as I do.
Well, is there anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Um, yeah, I would say just uh, don't there's no benefit to shaming or judging oneself. It's I mean, this is such an insidious substance, and it it really does sink its teeth into people, and just the self-flagellation doesn't serve any purpose. So if you backslide, just accept it and learn from it. No, it's not a, I saw this quote once on a t-shirt that said, "I do not fail, I win or I learn." And I really like that. So, if you backslide for a day or a dose, then try to figure out why, what happened, maybe do some journaling, some meditation, self-reflection, and move on from it. And yeah, don't beat yourself up. It's not a it's not a race. Yeah, just whatever. Take your time and do it right the first time.
Yeah, I love that. I either win or I learn is a great mantra,
Yeah.
a way of living. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for listening from early on. I know I've mentioned Jay many times on the show over the many episodes, and it's great to have you finally on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited. So this is another, I know one of the questions that we didn't get to was like, what do you have to prevent or to avoid relapse? And I mean, just knowing that I was going to be a guest on the show and that I'm talking about how much clean time I have now. Yeah, it keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, and if anyone wants additional help tapering or wants to vent or a shoulder to cry on, just, yeah, they can reach out to you and you can connect us. And I'm happy to use what I learned and give back.
We do need more tapering experts and resources and people who can talk about it, some confidence and some experience. So thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
Charlie. This was fun.
Kratom in the headlines. Hey everybody, it's Jacob, and this week we have the Tampa Bay Times Deadly Dose Expose series of articles that were released over the past few weeks entitled Kratom's Meandering Trail from Indonesia to Consumers in Florida. So essentially, supply chain and how that all works for one of the more popular Kratom brands that is known for their potent extract shots. So essentially, there's kind of hundreds of businesses and middlemen involved. The Kratom for this product and brand starts in Indonesia, typically on the island of Borneo. It's grown and then sent to a city like Pontianak for processing into a fine powder. It's then sent to a port city. The article and video highlighted Surabaya, where it then begins its 1 month-ish journey to a West Coast port city in the USA, most popular one being Oakland, California. It's then sent via truck to a city outside of Atlanta, Georgia, Marietta. Samples are then sent to Michigan for testing for, alcoholic content, presence of heavy metals, etc. From here, the path diverges. So some of the raw kratom powder is sent to Texas, where it is treated for contaminants. It's then sterilized in the Fort Worth area, and the path is different for extracts. Those are sent to a large facility in Springfield, Colorado, where it's processed into extract powder. That powder is then sent back to Marietta, Georgia. It's then transformed into liquid extract or packaged into extract powder capsules. At this point, all of those Kratom products are sent to another warehouse in Dallas, where it's bottled, packaged, branded, and distributed across the country. The article particularly highlights it's hitting the Florida marketplace in the Tampa Bay area in gas stations, book shops, etc. We have a YouTube video that is linked to the Tampa Bay Times.
Kratom has been used for hundreds of years in Southeast Asia, but Americans consume it differently. Liquid shots and capsules are manufactured to be more concentrated.
The more concentrated products, those are the things that we have a bigger concern about, simply because the exposure can be much faster and much higher.
There are no established therapeutic or toxic doses. The Times bought Kratom products for testing and found that many don't have drug interaction warnings or dosing instructions on their labeling.
Does it accumulate over time? More than likely it does. We haven't done those studies. No one's done those studies. So we're still looking at several years down the road before we will have something that could say, yes, indeed, this does help with mood elevation or depression, or indeed, this does help with treating substance use disorders.
That has prompted some to ask, how can something so widely available be associated with so much tragedy? The answer is that Kratom is largely unregulated. The industry has been left essentially to police itself. Scientists who study the plant acknowledge that Kratom is not easy to regulate. Many researchers argue it should not be banned. But as it stands today, when lawmakers across the country craft rules for Kratom, they're mostly just getting one side of the story, the industries.
So a very, very complex web of growers, transporters, shell companies, and processing plants, warehouses, etc., all go into the Kratom products that are consumed by consumers in the United States. So this is just one of the hundreds of different Kratom brands and products available across the country that was highlighted by the Tampa Bay Times. It's an interesting supply chain, and usually for most goods and services that are sold in the US, you don't see this kind of thing. I worked for an e-commerce company for a short time in my career. I have a tech background, and I actually worked on some supply chain software for a little while. And that company sold furniture, and a lot of that furniture supply chain was very straightforward. Went from a manufacturer, usually in Eastern Europe or China, directly to a port city, imported into the US, directly to a warehouse where it was then shipped to the customer when they purchased it. As you can see, that versus this complex web of Kratom supply chain is very different. So that's Kratom in the headlines for this week. Happy New Year, everybody.
Resource of the week. Before we delve into that, I want to comment on the Deadly Dose series, part 3 in particular, that Jacob was just talking about. There was 3 takeaways from that I had. One is it showed the opaque corporate structures that the Kratom entities use all along the supply chain to hide who owns and who can be accountable for importing, shipping, and processing and packaging Kratom products. 2, there's many points in the process where good manufacturing practices aren't followed, and it can lead to a dirty and contaminated supply chain. And 3rd, the written article really delved into the working conditions for workers, especially at the Colorado site, which I think now is closed down, if I understand right. Some Kratom industry workers experience twitching, seizures, nausea, and opiate withdrawal just being in close contact and with Kratom, working with it. So the resource of the week this week is St. Johns Hopkins, the research institution, reached out to us about a new Kratom survey, and they would like us to tell our listeners about it. They're hoping to capture all experiences, including those who may have quit Kratom. They want a diversity of experiences to be documented, not just the favorable ones. So I'll read the flyer. The Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine is seeking volunteers to complete an online survey study about substance use. We want to learn about experiences with novel or less commonly used substances, such as Kratom, kava, and tiaptine. If you have used these substances, you may be eligible to complete the survey. The survey is anonymous and does not collect personal health information about you. Completion times will vary based on substance use experience, but we estimate the survey to take approximately 30 to 35 minutes to complete. There are no treatment options or compensation for the study. If you are interested in volunteering to complete the online survey, please see the link in our show notes. Jacob and I have both completed this survey, and we encourage you to. One complaint about this survey is it's a little bit long. It's because they need to have some context. They have to need to collect enough data that has some depth and some breadth for it to be qualitatively, valid, and for it to have enough rigor to be publishable. Hence the longer survey. I would recommend doing it when you have a moment when you're not feeling rushed and you're not multitasking. It's not a complicated questionnaire, but it does feel like a Lord of the Rings movie where I think you're done and then there's more segments to complete. So that's the resource of the week. A couple last notes. I want to wish our very first guest, Elliot, who just in the last week celebrated a new baby in his family. That kid came in time just for the tax break and for the annual health insurance deductible. So good job there. And last, I'd like to wish everybody a happy new year. And until next time, keep it kratom free.